Hey guys, welcome back to another review. Today we're going to talk about the low light of the 4K and the 4.6K Ursa Mini. I had an 18-inch China bowl like a foot away from my face off to camera left, and that was it. This is in my unfinished basement with a bunch of random toys that my kids had. I was actually very surprised at the differences between the cameras. Using the 4.6K compared to the 4, I kind of noticed, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a little better. But actually comparing them side by side, it's a huge difference. Again, all the settings are exactly the same. The ISO, same lens. I'm shooting on the Sigma Art lens. It's the 18-35. I was on the 35. You can also see the crop factor between the two cameras. The 4.6K has way less of a crop. Not super significant, but it's there. You can see the difference. So here's ISO 800 at 1.7. I was just doing about 2 stops overexposed, and look at the 4K. Look how the highlights just crunch up right away compared to the 4.6K that still has really good information and just rolls off the face beautifully. Here I just had fun. I underexposed by 2 stops on both cameras just to see how bad it would be if you're shooting in low light and you really can't get anywhere close to what you need to be, right? So here's 2 stops underexposed on both cameras. Now the thing that I found really interesting was the 4.6K had kind of a blue tint to it when you got to up to 1600. So, and then here I have the same shots that were earlier, except I did just a really quick color correction on it. I didn't actually try to balance the cameras. All I did was do a contrast and a saturation. That's it. So this just is kind of giving you some examples as far as like overexposed, underexposed, 800 versus 400. Now, the big thing that you'll notice is right away when you get into 800, even when it's properly exposed on the 4K, but when I try to pull up those darks, you can see a lot of flickering in that mouse's face as it's going. It's just like this like nasty flicker. And then you can see it also on the clowns in the background. And it's just muddled. It's just not a good image. And then here I did the overexposed to try and bring back some of the information, and both cameras did pretty well actually. Really nasty blue tint, which is sort of fixable, but it still is pretty ugly. But my face still looks pretty good. Like as far as light to dark, still looks pretty decent. But then you get into the 4K and just look at that mouse. You can see the horizontal banding in that mouse's face, like right away, like boom, there it is. And you see the flickering, and it's just nasty and it's terrible. The 4K is terrible in low light. Like I said before, this is not a low light camera, not at all. And actually the 4.6K I wouldn't call a low light camera either, although it does way better. Like here we go. As far as like on the side of the mouse's face, you're talking a 0.7. The only spot that's actually properly exposed is probably the mouse's eye, is a 2. And the 4K actually didn't do too horrible with this one. But compared to the 4.6, way more information in the shadows. The highlights don't look as crunchy. I hope this was helpful. It helped me a lot. I'm actually glad you guys asked me to do this because, man, I learned a lot about those cameras. And here's my conclusion. Conclusion time. You ready? The 4.6K is totally worth the extra $2,000. Who cares about the rolling shutter? Everything else about that camera is way more stellar than the 4K. The 4K it just doesn't handle the highlights or the shadows nearly as well. And of course it doesn't. It's only 12 stops of dynamic range versus 15, you know? Now, the magenta is pretty harsh on the 4.6K. I will say that, especially in the ProRes. Shooting RAW, super easy to take out. With the ProRes, it's a little bit more difficult. It takes a little bit more finessing in Resolve. Anyway, subscribe to my channel, guys. Thanks.